Airbnb, the previous renter's notes. Before I recount this chilling experience, know that extensive research, including consultations with religious scholars, paranormal investigators, and esoteric practitioners, has yielded unsettling corroboration. They recognize the entity we encountered, or entities like it, as real, beings that feed on fear and exist in the shadowy fringes of our reality. The rain hammered against the attic window, a relentless, drumming rhythm that mirrored the frantic pulse in my throat. Outside, the wind howled, a mournful, drawn-out cry that seemed to claw at the very foundations of the old Victorian house. Inside, the silence was worse. A thick, suffocating silence, punctuated only by the occasional creak of settling timber and the frantic thumping of my own heart. My partner, Liam, was downstairs, attempting to coax some life from the ancient, sputtering boiler. I could hear the clanging of metal and his frustrated muttering, a distant, muffled sound that did little to alleviate the gnawing unease that had settled over me since we arrived at this isolated Airbnb. We'd booked the place as a weekend getaway, a chance to escape the suffocating press of city life and reconnect with nature. The photos online had painted a picture of rustic charm, a sprawling, ivy-clad house nestled in the heart of a dense, ancient forest. The reality, however, was far more foreboding. The house, christened Willow Creek Retreat by the owner, was far more dilapidated than the pictures suggested. The paint peeled from the walls like sunburnt skin, and the garden, once undoubtedly beautiful, was now a tangled wilderness of overgrown shrubs and gnarled, skeletal trees. The air itself felt heavy, thick with the scent of damp earth and something else, something acrid and metallic that I couldn't quite place. The first sign of trouble had been the notebook. We were unpacking in the attic bedroom, a cramped, low-ceilinged space with a single, rain-streaked window, when I'd noticed it. Tucked beneath the sagging mattress, partially hidden by the dust ruffle, was a small, leather-bound notebook. Its pages were yellowed and brittle, and the leather cover was worn and cracked, as if it had been handled countless times. Curiosity piqued, I'd opened it. The handwriting was cramped and erratic, as if the writer had been in a hurry, or perhaps afraid. The initial entries were mundane, detailing the usual Airbnb experiences, complaints about the leaky faucet, praise for the comfortable bed, a stark contrast to my own assessment, and observations about the surrounding forest. But as I flipped through the pages, the tone shifted. The entries became shorter, more fragmented. The writer began to mention strange noises, scratching sounds in the walls, muffled footsteps in the night, a low, guttural growl that seemed to emanate from the very depths of the house. A chill ran down my spine as I read the final entry. "They know I'm here." That was it. No explanation, no context, just those four chilling words, scrawled in a shaky hand. I'd shown Liam the notebook, and he'd dismissed it as the ramblings of an overactive imagination, a harmless attempt at writing a spooky story. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong. The air in the attic seemed to grow colder, the shadows deeper. Every creak and rustle of the house sent a jolt of fear through me. Now, as the rain continued its relentless assault, I found myself pacing the small room, my senses heightened, every nerve ending screaming with alertness. I strained my ears, listening for any sound that didn't belong, a footstep on the stairs, a whisper in the wind, the rustling of unseen things in the darkness. The fear was a living thing, a cold, clammy hand that gripped my heart and squeezed. My breath hitched in my throat, and I felt a wave of dizziness swash over me. I had to get out of this room, out of this house. I descended the creaking stairs, my footsteps echoing in the oppressive silence. The house seemed to hold its breath, waiting, watching. The air grew colder, and the scent of damp earth and metal intensified, making my stomach churn. Liam was still wrestling with the boiler in the basement, his face flushed and his brow furrowed. He looked up as I approached, his expression a mixture of exasperation and concern. "Everything all right?" he asked, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. "We need to leave," I said, my voice trembling. "Now." "What? Why?" he asked, his frustration turning to confusion. I showed him the notebook, pointing to the final entry. His eyes widened, and a flicker of unease crossed his face. "This is weird," he admitted, his voice low. "Weird isn't the word I'd use," I said, my voice tight. "I think we're in danger." He hesitated, his gaze shifting around the dimly lit basement. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth and rust, and the shadows seemed to writhe and twist in the flickering light of the single bare bulb. "Okay," he said finally, his voice barely a whisper. "Let's get out of here." We scrambled up the stairs, our footsteps echoing in the oppressive silence. As we reached the living room, a sudden, sharp bang echoed from the attic. We froze, our hearts pounding in our chests. "What was that?" Liam whispered, his eyes wide with fear. "I don't know," I said, my voice barely audible. "But I don't want to find out." We rushed to the front door, fumbling with the ancient lock. The door creaked open, and we stumbled out into the storm. The rain lashed at our faces, and the wind tore at our clothes. We ran, our feet pounding on the muddy path, our breath coming in ragged gasps. The forest loomed around us, a dark, impenetrable wall of trees. The wind howled, and the trees seemed to sway and writhe like tormented spirits. We didn't stop running until we reached the car, parked a quarter of a mile down the winding driveway. We scrambled inside, slamming the doors and locking them. I turned the key in the ignition, and the engine sputtered to life. As we pulled away, I glanced back at the house. It stood silhouetted against the stormy sky, a dark, brooding presence. The attic window, where we had found the notebook, was a black, empty square. We drove in silence, the only sound the rhythmic swish of the windshield wipers and the pounding of the rain. The fear that had gripped me in the house had not abated. It lingered, a cold, clammy presence in the car, a constant reminder of the unseen horrors we had left behind. We didn't speak until we were miles away, the house and the forest long out of sight. "What do you think it was?" Liam asked, his voice low and hesitant. "I don't know," I said, my voice trembling. "But I don't think we were meant to find that notebook." The rest of the drive was tense, filled with the unspoken fear that we were being watched, followed. We didn't stop until we reached the nearest town, a small, brightly lit place with a 24-hour diner. We sat in a booth, sipping hot coffee and trying to calm our nerves. The bright lights and the chatter of other customers provided a temporary sense of security, but the fear still lingered, a dark, persistent shadow. We decided to report the incident to the police, but when we called the Airbnb host, they were dismissive, claiming that the previous renter was known for their eccentricities and that the notebook was just a harmless prank. The police, too, were skeptical, citing the lack of any concrete evidence. They took our statements, but they made it clear that they didn't consider the incident a serious threat. We returned to the city, but the experience had changed us. We were easily startled by sudden noises or shadows. The feeling of being watched, of being followed, persisted. We tried to put the incident behind us, to dismiss it as a strange, unsettling experience. But the memory of the notebook, of the final, chilling entry, refused to fade. One night, a few weeks later, I woke up to a strange sound. It was a scratching, a low, rhythmic scratching that seemed to emanate from the walls of our apartment. My heart pounded in my chest, and I sat up, my eyes wide with fear. I listened intently, straining to hear any other sound. The scratching continued, growing louder, more insistent. I reached for Liam, but he was fast asleep, his breathing deep and even. I got out of bed, my footsteps silent on the carpet. I crept towards the living room, where the scratching seemed to be coming from. The apartment was dark, illuminated only by the faint glow of the streetlights outside. As I approached the living room, I noticed a faint, acrid scent, the same metallic scent I had smelled in the Airbnb. The fear that had been dormant for weeks surged back, stronger than ever. I reached the living room and flicked on the light. The room was empty, but the scratching continued, coming from behind the wall. I pressed my ear against the wall, and the scratching grew louder, more frantic. Suddenly, the scratching stopped. A moment of silence hung in the air, thick and heavy. Then, a low, guttural growl echoed from behind the wall, a sound that sent a wave of terror through me. I stumbled back, my heart pounding in my chest. The growl was followed by a series of heavy thumps, as if something was banging against the inside of the wall. I screamed, a raw, primal sound that tore through the silence of the apartment. Liam bolted upright in bed, his eyes wide with confusion and fear. "What's happening?" he shouted, scrambling out of bed. "It's here!" I screamed, pointing at the wall. "It's in the walls!" The thumping intensified, shaking the pictures on the wall and rattling the windows. Liam grabbed a heavy lamp from the side table, his face pale and determined. "We need to get out of here," he said, his voice trembling. We rushed to the front door, fumbling with the locks. The thumping and growling continued, growing louder, more aggressive. Just as we managed to open the door, a section of the drywall exploded outwards, showering us with dust and debris. A dark, twisted shape emerged from the hole, its form indistinct in the dim light. It was tall and gaunt, with long, spindly limbs and glowing red eyes that burned with malevolent intent. A low, guttural growl emanated from its throat, a sound that chilled me to the bone. We screamed and stumbled back, our hearts pounding in our chests. The creature lunged forward, its long, clawed fingers reaching for us. Liam swung the lamp, striking the creature's arm. It recoiled with a hiss, its red eyes flashing with rage. We seized the opportunity and fled, slamming the apartment door behind us. We ran down the hallway, our footsteps echoing in the empty building. The creature's growls and thumps echoed behind us, growing closer. We reached the stairwell and descended the stairs, taking them two at a time. We burst out of the building and into the street, the cold night air stinging our lungs. We didn't stop running until we reached a brightly lit 24-hour gas station, the same place we had stopped after leaving Willow Creek Retreat. We stumbled inside, our bodies shaking, our breaths ragged. The cashier, a young man with tired eyes, looked at us with concern. "Are you all right?" he asked. We need help," I stammered, my voice trembling. "There's something in our apartment." We told him what had happened, our words tumbling over each other in our haste. He looked at us with a mixture of disbelief and fear. "I'll call the police," he said, reaching for the phone. The police arrived quickly, their sirens wailing through the night. They listened to our story, their expressions skeptical. They went to the apartment, but found nothing. The hole in the wall was gone, patched up as if it had never been there. They searched the building, but found no sign of the creature. They concluded that we had experienced a hallucination, a shared delusion brought on by stress and fear. We knew what we had seen, but we couldn't prove it. We were dismissed, our fears brushed aside. We returned to our apartment, but we couldn't stay there. The feeling of being watched, of being hunted, was too strong. We moved to a new apartment, in a different part of the city. We tried to rebuild our lives, to forget the terror we had experienced. But the memory of the creature, of its glowing red eyes and its guttural growls, haunted us. We began to research the history of Willow Creek Retreat, hoping to find some explanation for what we had seen. We discovered that the house had a dark history, a history of disappearances and strange occurrences. Local legends spoke of a creature that dwelled in the forest, a creature that fed on fear and despair. It was said to be ancient, a remnant of a forgotten time. We found records of a family that had lived in the house in the early 1900s. They had disappeared without a trace, leaving behind only a few scattered belongings and a series of disturbing journal entries. The entries spoke of strange noises, of shadows that moved on their own, of a feeling of being watched. The final entry was a chilling echo of the one we had found in the notebook. "It knows we're here." We realized that the creature was not confined to Willow Creek Retreat. It could follow its victims, feeding on their fear, growing stronger with each passing day. We knew that we were not safe, that the creature was still out there, waiting. We lived in a constant state of fear, our senses heightened, our nerves frayed. Every shadow, every sound, every creak of the floorboards sent a jolt of terror through us. One night, I woke up to a strange sound, a faint scratching coming from the closet. I sat up, my heart pounding in my chest. I reached for Liam, but he was gone. I got out of bed, my footsteps silent on the carpet. I crept towards the closet, the scratching growing louder, more insistent. I reached for the closet door, my hand trembling. As I opened the door, a wave of cold air washed over me. The closet was empty, but the scratching continued, coming from behind the wall. I pressed my ear against the wall, and the scratching grew louder, more frantic. Suddenly, the scratching stopped. A moment of silence hung in the air, thick and heavy. Then, a low, guttural growl echoed from behind the wall, a sound that sent a wave of terror through me. I stumbled back, my heart pounding in my chest. The growl was followed by a series of heavy thumps, as if something was banging against the inside of the wall. Then, a voice, a raspy, guttural whisper, echoed from behind the wall. "You can't escape me," it whispered. "I know you're here." The whisper was followed by a series of sharp, tearing sounds, as if something was ripping through the drywall. I screamed, a raw, primal sound that tore through the silence of the apartment. The wall exploded outwards, showering me with dust and debris. The creature emerged from the hole, its form more defined, its red eyes burning with malevolent intent. It lunged towards me, its long, clawed fingers reaching for my throat. I screamed again, and then everything went black. Liam found me the next morning, lying on the floor of the bedroom, covered in dust and debris. The wall was torn open, and the creature was gone. I was alive, But I was changed. The fear had consumed me, leaving me a shell of my former self. I was trapped in a perpetual state of terror, haunted by the memory of the creature and its chilling whisper. We left the city, abandoning our lives, our friends, our family. We moved to a remote cabin in the mountains, hoping to find some semblance of peace. But the creature followed us. It was always there, lurking in the shadows, whispering in the wind, scratching at the walls. We were trapped, prisoners of our own fear, hunted by a creature that fed on our terror. We knew that we could never escape, that the creature would never let us go. We were living in a nightmare that would never end. The notebook had been a warning, a desperate plea for help. We had ignored it, and now we were paying the price. We were living proof that some doors are better left unopened, some secrets are better left buried. And some houses, some places, are simply too tainted to ever offer safe haven.